When the boy saw the infant in his mother's arms, he remarked, "She's not my sister." In order to persuade the boy that the baby was actually his sister, the parents decided to conduct a DNA test. At first, they assumed he was just jealous. But then a terrible truth was exposed by the test results. Other people were envious of the kind of couple Lana and Curtis were. With friends and family present, their wedding celebration had been like something out of a storybook, taking place outdoors on a lovely day with blue skies. Then, as a perfect couple, they moved to live in the suburbs of New York. They got along well, loved one another, worked during the week, and had weekends free to spend with friends and live it up. So they made the decision to grow the family. Lana made the choice to leave her job during her first pregnancy in order to be able to raise her child full-time because Curtis was successful enough to provide for the family alone. Even with all of the additional duties and routine adjustments, their lives continued to be almost ideal. Even in the final weeks of her pregnancy, Lana took care to clean every room of the house and made sure it smelled of homemade food and lavender. The couple's first child, Fred, was then born. Although he was very loving toward his parents, he did cry a lot at night. The baby's early displays of intelligence surprised Lana and Curtis because they were so clear. When the boy was old enough to attend school, the couple thought about enrolling him in a private school that provided extra classes for kids from families with higher incomes. Curtis was proud of his son's talent and intelligence. "Calm down, honey, he's just a kid. We can evaluate that in our free time," Lana said, trying not to temper her husband's enthusiasm. And every day, Fred learned more. The boy handled the assigned homework from the school with little difficulty. The second pregnancy for Lana happened quickly. Fred was excited when they first told him the news. He frequently leaned into the mother's belly to give her a hug and listen to the unborn child. He claimed that despite only being 5 years old, he was attempting to defend his mother. Lana found everything to be very beautiful. Even before the baby brother was born, Fred was already displaying a lot of affection for him. She could not have imagined a better life, but things were about to get very, very different. Since Curtis would be with her in the maternity ward, Lana didn't want Fred to be by himself when he went into labor. So she requested that Donna Clarice, her mother, keep the boy. In actuality, Lana's second delivery wasn't as simple as her first. Like Fred, she had prepared herself for a natural birth, and she was prepared to put in as much effort as necessary for however long it took. Lana was exhausted and covered in perspiration 2 hours later because the baby had no desire to be born. The woman had already stopped doing that for pleasure, and the doctor and nurses who had been monitoring the entire process soon realized that she was in pain. There was a problem with Lana. After conducting some urgent examinations, the doctor concluded that it was too risky to carry out the regular delivery. Lana resisted the urge to give up. She would repeat what she had done 5 years earlier. But after 30 minutes had passed, it was clear that the mother no longer possessed the attitude or the strength required for that method of delivery. More than that, the obstetrician understood that the child would not emerge from the mother's body naturally. Lana was in jeopardy, and they had already lost too much time. There was a need for an urgent cesarean. Curtis was very anxious about everything. He preferred the idea of a cesarean delivery because he wasn't ready to witness all of his wife's suffering. Lana was put to sleep as soon as she also consented to the procedure. At that point, Curtis didn't want to let go of the woman's hand or distance himself from her, so he stayed in the space. He was terrified of blood, though, and eventually fainted as the scalpel started to open Lana's womb. However, the birth went well. The infant, a lovely girl named Sarah, as well as Lana were both healthy and stable. While still under the influence of the drugs, Curtis regained consciousness and stood next to the woman admiring the infant. The first feeding of Sarah was a tender moment that made her parents cry. As the infant continued to nurse from his mother's breast, Curtis said, "Another little miracle we created, my love," kissing her forehead. I am eagerly anticipating Fred's meeting her. He's going to be the world's greatest big brother, gushed Lana, who couldn't help but gaze lovingly at the infant. Fred was on the porch of the house, jumping for joy, waiting impatiently next to his grandmother for his little sister to arrive when Lana was released from the hospital and able to return home. The boy rushed over to the mother and child as soon as the back door of the vehicle opened. With the child on her lap, Donna Clarice went to assist her daughter in rising from the bench. What transpired next, however, was not what the family had anticipated. "This is Sarah, Fred's sister. Come say hello," Curtis said as Lana lowered herself to reveal the newest member of the family as he spoke. But rather than grinning and being happy to see the girl, Fred scowled and his expression hardened. Everyone was perplexed and shocked by what he said as he shook his head side to side. He turned to his parents and said, "She's not my sister." Everyone was silent for a brief moment as they pondered whether the boy was being serious or joking. Clarice, the grandmother, broke the awkward silence that followed that shock. "What did you say, Fred?" But the youngster remained silent. "Son, why is that?" "Yes, she is your sister," interjected Curtis, requesting that he give the child one more look. Fred followed his father's instructions while frowning and having eyes that appeared to be silently questioning him. Since everyone in his family had brown hair and eyes, he was curious as to why the infant had light hair and blue eyes. Despite his youth, Fred made this note as if defying his grandparents' and parents' reasoning. This time, Lana took the initiative. "Honey, it's hard to explain, but it does happen. Her eyes and hair may eventually turn darker. She was recently born." Again shaking his head, Fred entered the house after making it clear that he didn't agree with the response. Lana and Curtis exchanged worried glances as they tried to figure out why their eldest son was speaking poorly of the newcomer. Was it resentment? Are you worried about losing your parents' love? Donna Clarice entered the conversation after observing the couple's anxiety and assured them that their reaction shouldn't be anything more than peculiar. Soon, Fred would realize that the baby wouldn't threaten his status as a son, and everything would be okay. Make him sense loved and desired. "By the way, let him know you need his assistance and watch how he reacts," said Clarice. The words of the more knowledgeable woman calmed the couple. In contrast, nothing altered in the weeks that followed. Fred maintained a certain distance from Sarah and occasionally reiterated that Sarah was not his younger sister. After all, that was a bad thing to say. Curtis didn't like this behavior and didn't think twice to get his son's attention. Lana asked her eldest son to assist her when she went to bathe her daughter. She hoped that the boy would stop fantasizing about the girl not being a family member if he felt useful and responsible for her. Yet it was useless. Fred assisted the mother in giving the infant a bath, but he did so quietly and without expressing any particular affection. A completely different attitude from the young boy who, upon learning he would have a sister, even hugged his mother's tummy. There was no result from anything Lana and Curtis tried. Months had passed, and now a 6-year-old boy's skepticism threatened the ideal family they had created for an unknown reason. Fred wouldn't even play with Sarah if Lana didn't insist. Sarah was now a little older and more conscious, and she appeared to be trying to get her older brother's attention at various points, but the boy pretended it wasn't with him. For parents, seeing such a thing was heartbreaking. Because he could take no more of this, Curtis convinced Lana to let him take their son to a psychologist. They might have needed professional assistance because this jealousy reaction was so severe. Lana concurred, not knowing what else to do. Fred was brought to child psychologist Warren Robertson the following week. The oldest son remained adamant despite 4 sessions. He was certain that the girl who lived in his home and nursed at his mother's breast was not his real sister, though he was unable to explain why or how. Warren made the decision to suggest an experiment after realizing that Fred was a very intelligent and logical young man. He invited Curtis and Lana into his office and suggested they get a DNA test. Fred is only 6 years old, but he's a very intelligent boy who understands what a DNA test is. I advise you to take the test. All of Fred's mistrust will be disproved when he sees the biological evidence that Sarah is his sister. The notion seemed a little radical to Lana because it implied that they had similar doubts about the mother of their own daughter. Curtis, however, soothed her by explaining that the audition was merely a formality so that Fred could finally accept Sarah into our family. Lana finally gave in because it was best for everyone. She just wasn't aware that she would have to give him a surprise that would forever alter his life. The couple decided to proceed despite the cost of the DNA test. Both the girl's parents and the girl had their blood drawn. The outcome would be available in a few days. Curtis, Lana, and Sarah had a very happy time back then. The young child was growing very well. She was sitting down and making an attempt to crawl around the room even though she was still unable to walk. She laughed heartily when she played, the kind of laugh that only babies can produce and that can make even the coldest hearts around her melt. She loved her parents, and she got along great with her grandmother, Donna Clarice. She could only watch the elderly woman stretch out her arms and request a lap. Lana's day was made bright and curious by her eyes. Since they awoke, and Curtis. Obviously the child, but it was also enjoyable for them. When they realized that the four of them couldn't enjoy themselves at home because Fred couldn't talk to Sarah, they felt hurt. And the boy did not have that as a personality trait. He got along just fine with all the neighborhood kids. The DNA test was finished on a Friday morning, and Curtis looked up the results online. His heart stopped beating as he read what was written in the document. He cried, "That's not possible." He called Lana, and she hurried over holding the infant in her arms. She was speechless after reading. Reread it several times. I wanted to be certain that I wasn't misinterpreting. According to the report, Sarah's DNA did not match that of her parents Lana and Curtis. Husband was in disbelief. Did the baby sample not match his DNA because Lana had cheated on him? To make sure they understood that document correctly, the husband phoned the doctor in charge of the laboratory. Everything was confirmed by the doctor. The analysis's findings proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the girl was neither Lana nor Curtis's child. But if she emerged from me, how is that possible? Lana sobbed uncontrollably while asking God how that was possible. Curtis made an effort to comfort the woman by suggesting that they retake the exam because mistakes do happen. But the lady wasn't paying attention. Did you see the moment Sarah was born and then came into my arms? She asked her husband until she abruptly stopped crying, but still with a heavy look on her face. Do you still recall this? Because I was under anesthesia. Curtis claimed that he had been unconscious when the scalpel began to open up the woman's belly, so he had missed all of this. The child had already become like them when he came to. The couple experienced fear for the first time at that precise moment. They understand they could have switched babies in the maternity ward. Days went by after that suspicion for Curtis and Lana. Since she was a baby, they had loved that precious little girl, but DNA testing revealed she was not their child. Should they ignore everything and continue to act as though Sarah was related to them by blood, or should they seek the truth and run the risk of losing the child they adored? Lana now cared for Sarah as if she didn't feel the same way as before, while Curtis was struggling to focus on his work. All of the remaining happiness in that home was dredged up by the doubts that the DNA test and the circumstances surrounding the birth raised. Even Donna Clarice did not stop experiencing all of that. The couple made the decision to investigate the situation carefully and learn the truth. They demanded an investigation and brought the DNA test to the maternity ward where Lana had given birth. The facility's administrators, who were terrified, vowed to do everything in their power to figure out what had happened. A team was tasked with reviewing all births that took place on the same day as Sarah and occasionally in the same vicinity. 10 days later, they located the family who may have been in possession of Lana and Curtis' biological daughter. Compared to Fred's parents, they were a younger couple in a much more difficult situation. After losing their already modest home due to a storm, they lived with their in-laws. They were carrying a girl who had a hairlip at birth and was thought to be Lana and Curtis' biological daughter. She required appropriate care and corrective surgery in order to live a full life in the future. However, the young people who had kept the child lacked the prerequisites and materials for such procedures. The situation is that the maternity team got in touch with the young couple and explained everything that had gone wrong. The mother's world fell apart as she pondered how they could have allowed such an absurdity to occur. The father was silent but just as dejected. They were also fond of and attached to the youngster, whom they had mistaken for their daughter for months. How on earth could they now let her go? Curtis and Lana faced the same conundrum. When they looked at Sarah after learning the whole truth, they felt excruciating pain. The two families decided to proceed with the baby swap because they had no other options and were determined to make things right. The four of them had never experienced anything so difficult. Having to relinquish control of the infants they knew and had raised. They felt a mixture of emotion and indifference when they held a new baby because they didn't know the little girls, even though each of them was their real father's daughter. Anyhow, that was the end of one story and the beginning of another. Curtis took the wheel as Lana regarded the uneasy child in her arms on the way home. How long before she acknowledged Lana as her mother? And how long would it take Lana to feel the same way about her that she did about Sarah? Curtis recalled that Fred, their first child, had recognized the infant as not being his real sister the moment he laid eyes on her, and in the end, he had been correct. It'll never be known how he came to know. Curtis was concerned about his son's reaction, though, when the new Sarah came home. She has darker hair similar to ours. The little eyes are blue, though, Lana pointed out. Fred and his grandmother Clarice were waiting for his parents once more. He had lost all anxiety and was much more at ease. The parents arrived, calmly exited the vehicle, and carried the girl into the room in their arms. As Fred got closer, Lana stooped down so the boy could see the kid. He gave her a direct glance. Fred smiled adoringly, and the infant extended her arms to him. "My sister is this?" The boy asked, "Can I hold her in my arms?" as everyone in the room started to cry. The girl adapted to the new family very well. Fred, who was constantly playing with and taking care of the girl, making her laugh, and teaching her new tricks, also found that Curtis and Lana quickly came to love her. Corrective lip surgery could be performed in the future, which would make her look flawless right away. Growing up, Fred and Sarah were best friends. Years later, no one has yet been able to figure out how Fred knew the young girl wasn't his sister. Even he is unable to recall the precise reason behind his thought. It's a mystery that was kept from him when he was younger, but Donna Clarice always claims that it was the boy who prevented two families from making a terrible error. If you enjoyed the story, please click the like button. You'll likely feel the same way about the next video that just started playing. Till the next video, have a good session.